Hi everybody, welcome along to yet another Friday Live with Keyboard World. Myself, Paul, and I'm really pleased that we've got Andy with us today. Andy's going to lurk around in the background for the first bit. And we've got something a little bit different for you today, and I'm quite looking forward to this actually, because we've done a lot of webinars about products. And we always say, you know, it's you've got to reach a happy medium. Yes, you need to know the product, and we will continue on future webinars to help you with the buttons and all the functions. But at the same time, you have to be able to play as well. And I know, talking to quite a few of you, whether it's via messaging or email, you do want to get better with your playing. And what we've got for you today is a few little hints and tips that I think will give you some nice little things to try and will enhance your playing a little bit. I don't think there's going to be anything today that none of you can have a go at. That's the important bit. Some of it will take a little bit more thought than some of the other bits, but you know, I've said this so many times, I just want you to have a go at these things, that's all. So I'm going to do the first bit of the webinar. Let's just put the other screen back on so you can see where we are. There we go. This first bit, look, we're using a Genos today, but that's irrelevant really. Just happened to be the keyboard that was set up this morning. So rather than swap things over, we're going to use this today. This is about playing today. And my first bit is all about something we call playing in thirds. Now, some of you may already do this, and some of you, well, all of you will have certainly heard the effect of playing in thirds. And I suppose the starting point is I need to explain what it is when we're playing in thirds, because the first bit can be a little bit confusing when you watch it. We all know the tune, don't we? Spanish Eyes. Okay, so let's just take it key of C to start with. But what I'm going to do through my session, I am going to introduce you to doing this in lots of other keys, because we often stick in C because it's the easy option. But I want to show you how you work this little thing that I'm going to show you out in other keys as well. So Spanish Eyes, very straightforward. We could play it like this. I'll just leave that rhythm on, that's all right. There we go. Speed it up a bit. Okay, it's nice and easy when it's in C. So our first note is E. How would I convert that into playing in thirds? Well, I put the C with it. And that first bit of the phrase is going to be really important because we're going to use this a lot today. And the nice thing about the first bit of the phrase, and we'll get this out the way to start with, the fingering it falls naturally. If you start on 1 and 3, then it goes to 2 and 4, and 3 and 5. So that's your first thing to practice. Now, I said I'd better explain what thirds are. Why is that a third? Because they're not 3 notes apart. Well, what they are, if you think about it, you know, Andy always goes on about scale chords, doesn't he? Yeah, quite right too. We talk about scale chords, and again, I'm getting these things out the way early on today. A lot of people, I know this for a fact, it's not that they don't understand what we're telling you, but I know there's a good percentage of people who don't understand why we're telling you certain things. Because I've had people say to me, yeah, but I can play without knowing all that. Well, yes, of course you can. That's not a problem. But if you want to put some of these extra little bits in, that's where you need that sort of understanding of exactly how it's constructed. So thirds, we have major thirds and minor thirds. Okay? So think of our scale chords in C. It was C, followed by D minor, followed by E minor, followed by F, followed by G. And as Andy always tells you, the pattern is major, minor, minor, major, major. So as we're doing my little thirds there, in effect, we're going through major chords and minor chords. And let me show you the difference when it comes to thirds. A major third is always 4 half steps away. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Takes you to the E. So from the C, go up 4 half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, look at the next one we played. Now count the half steps. 1, 2, there's only 3 this time. Because that is a minor third. Because actually there isn't another black note there, is there? So, next one, E minor. It's only 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. The next one, which is major, 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. So we're looking at either 3 steps or 4 steps. But actually in the key of C, if you just miss the note out in the middle, it works. All right? Without the theory, it works. So if we were now to replay Spanish Eyes, but we'll play it in thirds. Now, it's starting to sound a lot nicer straight away. As I said, you'll have heard this type of thing so many times before. Do you all know the song Yellow Bird? Let's have a listen to that. Let's just find a nice sound for it. All played in thirds. Now, I know you can switch a button on and it will do it automatically for you. Of course it will. But what if you're playing single note melody and then you want a little phrase in thirds, just for a few notes? You don't want to have to keep switching harmony buttons on. So trust me, it is much better to actually learn the technique so that you can use it live as and when you want it. And when I come to a couple of musical examples in a minute, you'll see exactly why we can't just keep switching harmony on and off, because it's not going to be clean when you actually do that. So, we've looked at Spanish Eyes. We've heard an example. Do you know, I just off the top of my head, I've just thought of another example. If I can find the right style here. You probably all know the Van Morrison song, Brown Eyed Girl. It has a classic guitar intro, which goes like this. Sorry, I can't see there because of the microphone's in the way. But anyway, excuses. All played in thirds. If I play that with a single note, it doesn't sound the same as what you're used to hearing on the record because it was all done in thirds. Now, let's just go back and let's just look at how we do this for different chords, because, like I said, it's ever so easy to say, yeah, let's just do it in C because it's easy. What if you did it in F? Well, let's start on F. Let's go, our first chord's a major, isn't it? So we go up our 4 half steps. It's F and A. Actually, it's the first and third out of the chord. And it would be the first and third out of all your scale chords. So we can't just step up to G and B because in the second step, it's a minor, isn't it? So if we've got G and we only go up 3 steps, we go to B flat. And that makes sense because in the scale of F, we've got the 1 flat, which is the B flat. So our second step would be G and B flat, and then we'd go to A and C. Okay? Let's do it in G. That's fairly straightforward, actually. We'll do G, and our 4 half steps up takes us to the B, which is the bottom part of your G chord, if you like, in its root position, first and third. Because the sharp in the scale of G is on the F, and that actually doesn't interfere with any of the notes that we're playing. Let's try another one, E flat. This one's a tricky one to finger, actually. We've got 3 flats to worry about. So we start there. I'm trying to do it so you can see the fingers as well there. And then up to there. So we go E flat and G, F and A flat, G and B flat. And what you want to do, you want to practice this in as many keys as you can. So just start a rhythm running. Let's try F. Let's try G. Back to C. Okay, that's your first step. Just get comfortable with the fingering and make it flow nicely. And I hope by now you understand where we're getting our thirds from. Here's the next problem. What if that chord was a minor? Because if you've been listening to Andy before, the pattern for minor is totally different. Let me just get my examples up here. There we go. So in a minor scale, the first chord is minor. The second chord is that funny diminished chord, followed by a major chord. So if we were to take A minor, we start on our A, but we only go up 3 half steps because it's a minor. The diminished is also 3 half steps, so we go up to the B, and 3 half steps takes us to the D, and then the next chord is our major, which is the C. Okay, so the same rule applies for any minor chord. Let's do D minor. So we've got D, we go up our 3 half steps. Again, just think about it. D minor in its root position, it's just the first and the third. And then we've got our E diminished. And then we go up to F. Okay? So you need to practice it in minor chords. Let's try G minor. Okay. Why did we have the B flat in there? Just to go through this once more. G, it's a minor. Let's just go up 3 half steps, and there it is. It's because G minor is the relative minor of B flat, and there is a B flat in the scale there. So you need to start practicing this now in minor keys. Okay, so I'm doing this step by step for you. Why have I just picked those first 3 steps out? Well, because actually it makes a really nice musical phrase that we can drop in, particularly on sort of Latin pieces. David's saying, wouldn't it be simpler to transpose everything into C? Yes, it would, but musically it would be very boring, because if you play everything in the key of C, although you don't, everything's on the same level, you're always going to fall into playing pretty much the same set of chords. You need to vary, and certain pieces are written specifically in certain keys because that's where they sound best. So, you know, it's I would say it's not difficult to work this out, and if you sit and just do a little bit of practice to start with, and just keep trying these different things. So look, where is this leading me? Let me put a little musical example up for you. Let's do this one first. Bésame mucho. Okay, first chord is D minor, so we're in a minor key. Now I've put some little bits up in red there. Imagine they're not there for a minute, and I'll explain why in just a second. Let me just play the first bit of the tune. Let's just change the style a little bit. Okay, I think we all know how the tune goes. the first thing you need to identify is, where do I need a little fill-in? Or, this is actually improvisation, which will lead nicely on to what Andy's going to do in the second spot. But people always say, how do you put the twiddly bits in? That's what this is. This is improvisation. So if we play the tune through again, what we're trying to identify to start with, and we can see it on the music, where are the pauses where nothing's really happening? There's the first one. There's the second one. Let's take it a bit further. There's another pause. So in those pauses, what I've been waffling on about for the first 10-15 minutes is we're going to use those first 3 steps. Think back to Spanish Eyes. We're going to use those exact first 3 steps, but using different chords, using the method to work them out that I've already given you. So our first chord is D minor, and we actually tried that one earlier. So we start on D and F, go to E and G, up to F and A. And we're going to put that as a little fill-in. On the next one, on G minor, you'll see I've varied this up a bit because I've got a little bit longer, a longer pause or a longer gap, if you like, in between the melody. I'm not only going to go up, I'm going to come back down, which is another nice thing, and use exactly the same fingering coming back down, so it all works out fine. So let's give that a try. Let's go back and play our tune. So start the rhythm. Let's carry on our next bit. Isn't that more interesting? Because that's what would happen. Imagine somebody singing this when there's that big pause where there's no new words coming in. That's when the band in the background would do that little fill. Well, you are the band. You're playing the melody as well. I'm not going to do this today, but we've talked in the past about setting a split up on the keyboard. So you can have one sound here and one sound there. Consider that. So you maybe play the melody, then go to a different sound to play the little fill-in. And that would work beautifully. And it gives you such a contrast. And here's the important thing about, why don't we do it automatically, or why do we just play in one key? The achievement level, it just makes you feel great when you do. We're only talking about a run of 3 notes effectively, but it makes you feel good because you've done it yourself. You haven't relied on a style or a piece of automation to do it for you. Okay, let's go on to the second page, which is over on the right-hand side there. Now, to point right, I have to point left because the thing's the other way around. So we're looking... This is bizarre. So we're looking at this now. And again, just for a minute, forget that those red notes exist, because this is another little trick with thirds. The actual tune goes like this. Now, what I'm going to say to you goes against all the rules that we've talked about before, because we've always said whenever you add additional notes, the melody always has to be the top note. And actually 99% of the time that's true. But this little trick with thirds will give you a lovely harmony that gives the music a little bit of a twist. It's a little bit unexpected. So instead of playing G, 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 I'm going to play as well the third above that. Doesn't it sound different? Let me play it through twice. The first time, I'm going to play it as it's written. Here's with our third harmony. I think that gives it a really, really nice twist. And again, remember, we're talking about one extra note that you're adding in. You could just play that third note, but having the two notes together is the real icing on the cake. But if you want to start with, there's nothing wrong with just playing the third above. But if you can get that extra note in, here we go. And if you notice in the next two bars, we go back to the normal melody. But I don't think you actually lose the feel of the melody. It's still there. What I'm going to do on the next line is a real special trick. So we've got pretty much the same phrase. All right, changes a little bit at the end. But we're not worried about that bit. We're worried about that first bit. Now, we went a third above. What would happen if we went a third above our third above? Wow. Yeah, exactly. So, look, a third above was the B flat. Let's go a third above that. So, in other words, we're making the top end of our G minor chord this time. Instead of the bottom two notes, we're taking the top two notes. Just in that one bar. That's all we're doing, and then we're dropping down to a third above again for the D minor bar. So let's take it back. Which is it? That way. Point that way. Let's take it from the top line there. So I'm going to be playing a third above, and at the beginning of the next line, I'm going a third above that just for one bar. Just see if you can hear the effect. Little cheeky one in there at the end, which I didn't put in red, but I just put that one in there at the end before we go back to the main theme. I think immediately that sounds, somebody said it sounds richer. I think it sounds more Spanish in some ways. You've got that lovely little sort of harmony effect coming in there. So I'm going to give you another couple of examples of how we can do exactly the same thing. So let's swap on to this one. Okay, similar sort of piece of music. This is just reinforcing really what we've just done. Nice little piece, a little bit slower. So I'm gonna take the tempo down a little bit because there's a bit more going on in the melody, which means you've got to be a little bit quicker this time getting to the little fill-in. But we followed the same principles. So if you look at the first chord of being D7. Well, I work out what my first three steps are. And then we've got G minor. Okay. And that's it, really, for the first... Yeah, that's it. That's all we want. D7 and G minor. So we've only got two steps to learn here. But again, can be really, really rewarding. I think you get the idea of how this is going to work. Can we do our little trick with a third above? Yes, I'm sure we can. If you look on the second page, I'm getting good at this, Andy. Yeah, point the wrong way. That's what you need to remember. If you look at the end of the first line there, I'm going to pick it up from halfway through that line, which is the G minor. Ignore the red notes for a minute. This is how it goes. That's the original. On just for those three notes, what if we played our third above? Doesn't half give it a lift, and it's that unexpected twist. A lot of things in music, they don't have to be complicated to do. It's those, I always say to people, it's those little things that make your ears prick up. You think, oh, that's different. And, you know, I'm not looking for you to do it all the way through a piece. If you played a third above all the way through a piece of music, it would sound horrendous because you've lost the melody completely, and it would be a nightmare to try and do it. But if you just put it on one little phrase there, that's the ear prick moment that, nice, different. So let's take it from that G minor again. Let's try it in the next line. We haven't added a lot to that piece of music, but we've added enough to make that into an arrangement rather than you just sitting down and playing it. Those little things would sound brilliant on brass. You know, if there was a way you could split the keyboard so that you've got your nice little guitar down here. Have we got any brass? There we are. I'll do it without the rhythm, but... Then back to the guitar. It's a bit high pitched there. You drop it down an octave, but getting the contrast of sound as well as those extra little bits. But so I'm hoping I've got about 5-10 more minutes to do, and I'm hoping you're seeing the benefit of learning to play in thirds. It's probably the stepping stone towards playing 3 and 4 notes, but actually there are times when just the 2 notes are perfect and better than 3 notes and 4 notes. Let's just stay with the Latin theme for a minute, because this little thing does work really well on Latin, and I'm just going to see on this one whether I can do a change of sound for you. I'm doing this on the fly, so just bear with me. Okay, so I want 2 and 4, so that's all right. So we'll play this. I'm going to play you a little piece. I think this is called In a Little Spanish Town. I've picked this because there's some really long gaps where there's nothing going on. So let's just play it first. Right, it's such a big pause that the piano has faded away and disappeared, and all we've got is the backing. So that, to me, immediately, I've identified the place in the music where I want to put my little fill. So shall we do our little thirds again? But what you need to do is just change the feel of it to fit the cha-cha a bit. And maybe, because we've got such a long pause, maybe we can do the one where we went up and down. Yeah, that's going to work, okay? So we're going up, then I'm playing the top one again, and back down. Sue's just brought up a good point. Will all these pieces be in the future magazine? I can't print them in the magazine because of copyright issues, although we did take a bit of a chance last time with the 2001. What I am going to say, when this webinar is finished, I'm going to pack all these pieces of music up, including the ones Andy's about to do, I'm going to put them in a folder. If anybody wants them, just email me. It's paul@keyboardworld.co.uk. I'll put it on the messages when Andy's back up. Send me an email and I will pop you these arrangements. They're nothing fancy. What I'm going to say to you, the danger of just getting these pieces of music, I have no issue with anybody getting them, but you need to understand how those fill-ins were put in. Don't only ever play Besame Mucho and History of Love because you've got them printed. You need to try and say, well, can I put that into another piece that I play? Okay? So, but yeah, thanks for the comments, Sue, and that was something you've reminded me to mention. We'll happily supply all these scores to anybody. And they're not broken in two, by the way, like they are on the screen. They're all on one page. I just put them either side so that we can get them a little bit bigger. Yeah. And you don't have to point that way to mean that way. Yeah, I know. So back to our cha-cha. We've identified where it is. We've got plenty of time to do our little fill. We only need C and G, so it's not going to be a bad one, this. So we'll start with the intro. You see how it works, okay? I'm going to try and do this manually. I don't know how well I'm going to succeed with the microphone blocking the buttons and everything, but we'll give it a try. No, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. No, we'll give it a go. Let's see if we can swap the sound. Let's just see where we're going. Yeah, we'll get away with this. Okay, so this is piano, and we're swapping to brass. You just got to imagine I'd taken the time to put a little split in the keyboard. Okay, it's like juggling. You keep having to look round to the side. Okay, we've concentrated on Latin. Does this work with other styles? Yeah, we've proved it with the what was the Van Morrison thing? Brown Eyed Girl. That is just that same. It's the same riff, but instead of playing it as a cha-cha, he played it on the guitar. Let's just go back to the guitar. Page 3. Yeah, I've got a little waltz to show you as well. Let's put the guitar on. That's exactly what we just played on the cha-cha, but we phrased it a little bit different for the cha-cha. Now, this is the element, we've spoken about this, you have to feel that. It's not easy to teach that. That comes from within. You just have to listen to the rhythm and actually sort of phrase the notes with the rhythm. Yeah, final little example, and we came up with this one just before the webinar started. I'll take a little country waltz, and let's just take the tempo down so I can do it nice and gently for you. Yeah, Tennessee Waltz. It's this next bit, just goes D7, G7. Now, could we do our little run on D7? And look, it leads perfectly onto G7, or G. So we could do that whole bar as a nice little fill. It'll sound great. Have a listen. Here it comes. It's great. This thing of thirds, it crops up all over the place. And look for those little places where you can put the third above as well. So that's my bit over, really. I hope it's given you some ideas. I hope it's given you, if nothing else, motivation. Because that's what today's all about, is can you just go away and try and implement one or two things that we actually show you. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to show you that, and it's been nice to do something different other than the buttons and that, but we will be back on that. I'm going to hand you over now to Andy, who's going to take you through a little bit more of what people generally think of as improvisation, and that's sort of jazz improvisation. So I'll see you probably at the end of the webinar, but thanks for listening, and I'll hand you over to Andy. There you go, mate.
Thank you, Paul.
Go on, you sit down.
Oh, thank you. Are you sure?
Yeah,
how are you going to get out?
There you go.
There you go. Right, good afternoon, everybody. Hello, hello. Pleasure to be here, as always. Wasn't that great, by the way? Wasn't that really good? And it's interesting that actually, once again, Paul, I don't know how we do this.
Yeah.
We seem to have dovetailed together with our topics. My topic generally is this improvisation, and it's a huge topic which we could talk about for hours and hours and hours and days. But I just want to do a little introduction into improvisation. Now, I'm just going to perhaps disagree slightly with what Paul said. My sort of style here is going to be a little bit more jazzy. But improvisation takes many forms, many different forms. And indeed, we've just seen Paul improvising. Those thirds that he's added into his pieces of music are improvisation. And that's, I want to talk about where does this come from and how does it actually work. So I've got a little sheet here. I think I'm pressing the right button. If this goes horribly wrong, I do apologise. Oh, there we go. Isn't that marvellous? Again, you can have this. Just send an email to Paul. I believe he's just put up the web address, or the email address, I should say, the email address, and we'll send these through to you. So the basics of creating improvisation. Now, we need to go back a little bit. I'm going to do a bit of a quick review, okay? And Paul mentioned scales in his section, and indeed, I understand you can play without knowing your scales. Frankly, you put the piece of music up and you read it and you play it. What we're talking about is how can you actually do something different with that piece of music once you've got the music up on your music stand on your instrument at home. One great source for this is from the scale that the piece of music you're going to be playing in is based. Okay, it's that scale. Now, I'm going to be doing this in the key of C. I just noticed David earlier said, well, why not? Don't we just play everything in C? Well, it would become a little bit boring. You have to have minor keys as well. Everything would sound a bit the same. And I think if you played everything in C forever, frankly, you'd get a bit seasick. I think that goes without saying, really. It would all sound the same. So what we're going to do is we are going to be based in C, but as Paul said, please try it in some different keys. But we're going to use something called the 2-5-1 chord progression. Paul has talked about this, I've talked about this in the past, and it's a way of adding some chords into some simple arrangements, and it's a way you can embellish the chord progression. So, firstly, here's the scale of C. That's the top line here. It's just C major scale. Now, for those of you who haven't seen this before, many of you will. There is a formula for working out all the different major scales. It's very simple. You start on the root note. So we're in the key of C. The root note is therefore C. I'm just using a jazzy organ sound, by the way, that sort of sound. So your root note is C. And the formula, which I'm going to go through really quickly because we've done it many times before, root note, tone, tone, semitone, tone, if I can hit the right notes, tone, tone, semitone. Now, you may think, well, that works for C, but it works for every key. So if we wanted to start in the key of A flat, you're right, you can't see the keyboard, can you? But anyway, the root note of the key of A flat is, guess what? Yes, the note of A flat, root note, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Okay? And the scale chords that Paul touched on very briefly in his section are based around those notes. So if we go back to C, you probably have actually seen me do this before. My first root note, I create a chord around that, and it is no surprise to anybody, it is the chord of C. Okay, and the simplest way of thinking about this is miss a note, play a note. Miss a note, play a note. So that's called the one chord in the key of C. Okay? If I do the same with the D, you think, well, is it going to be D major? Well, no, it can't be, because in the key of C, I can't have the F sharp. So that has to come down to the F. So the 2 chord is the chord, that's C. The 2 chord is the chord of D minor. The 3 chord, following the same sort of progression, is an E minor. The 4 chord is F. The 5 chord is G. The 6 chord is A minor. The 7 chord is this funny chord that Paul mentioned, the diminished chord. And the 8 chord is just back to the 1 chord, so it's just a repeat of the 1. Okay. Now, I'm going to take this a stage further with you today. Okay. We're going to extend these chords with another note on top. Okay. So our C, I'm going to do the same process. Miss a note, play a note, becomes that. I'll do that with 2 hands. So it's C, E, G, B, just so you can see. That's a chord of C major 7. C major 7. Not dominant 7. If it was dominant 7, it would be the B flat. But it's not. It's major 7 because it's the B natural. The 2 chord, which was D minor, miss a note, play a note, becomes D minor 7. The 3 chord, which is E minor, miss a note, play a note, becomes E minor 7. F becomes F major 7. G becomes G7. A minor becomes A minor 7. I'm going to stop there, okay? I think you've got the idea. So when I talk about the 2, 5, 1, what I mean is we start on the 2nd chord, and if you remember, that's the D minor 7 to a G7, which is the 5 chord, to a 1 chord, which is the C major 7. You're right, in Arizona, adding the 7th chord does make the sound a lot bigger. It's a lot richer. Particularly that major 7th is really nice. It's a nice sort of sophisticated chord. The D minor 7 is fuller. The G7 is the best 5 chord to play because it really pushes you back to your 1 chord. So this first little section here is only based around 2, 5, 1, and you can keep repeating that if you want to. So we're going D minor 7, G7, C major 7. So if I wanted to play D minor 7, oh, I'll do it down here. D minor 7, G7, and C major 7. D minor 7, G7, C major 7. Now, because those chords, and this is the important point, this is where we've been leading. Okay. These chords are formed from the C major scale, which actually means the notes of C major will fit with these chords. Okay? Some fit a little bit better, but basically there's no wrong notes. So I can run up and down the C major scale using these chords at will. D minor 7, G7, C major 7, D minor 7, G7, C major 7. Nothing there that I'm playing with the right hand actually sounds bad. It sort of fits. Okay? It sort of fits. Now then, you can do different rhythmic patterns. That's all that line 3 is here. In a jazzy style, and I don't want to emphasize that too much, because we can improvise in pop music, we can improvise with a ballad, we can improvise in any different style of music. But if you're playing something a bit jazzy, the normal pattern is involving quavers, or eighth notes as they're known in America, for Arizona there. So quavers. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and if I had the chords in 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. So that's all fine. No problem. It sort of works. But nothing's really popping out. Doesn't sound sensational, does it, really? It sort of works. It gives you a few basics. The first thing I'm going to change is actually the next line, which starts on bar 19, is we're going to do something called playing in modes. Don't panic. It sounds complicated. It's really, really easy. Okay? And this is going to make the chords and the sound pop stand out a lot more than they were doing. So instead of just running up and down C, when I play a D minor 7 chord, I'm going to start on the D note, but still only play white notes. Okay? So I'm not playing D major scale, I'm not playing D minor scale. I'm playing C scale, but starting on the D note. Okay? When I play G7, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to play the C scale, but I'm going to start on the G note. And when I go to C major 7, I'm going to go back to C. Okay? Now, these are called modes. Modes is a very, very complex system, which, if I'm frank about it, I don't really understand fully myself, to be truthful. But the D minor 7, it's called a Dorian mode. Yeah, I don't know. The G7 is actually called a Mixolydian mode, believe it or not. And the C is an Ionian mode, which is just a posh way of saying a major scale. It's a bit odd. But listen to the difference that it makes. So here's your D minor 7 starting on the note of D. And your G7 starting on G. And you're back to your C starting on C. I'm going to run down this time. I'll do that again. I went up that time. Okay. That's interesting. Sounds a bit better, doesn't it? I think sounds better. I'm going to also use another jazzier style, and you can mix and match all of this. Instead of all the notes being even, the quavers at the line above there are all even quavers. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... I'm going to do this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and this is a jazzier style. You'll see why in just a moment. But it adds something to what's known as the swing of the music. It starts to sound a bit jazzier. Yeah? So let's do that again. I'm going to start on the D with the D minor 7 chord. Okay, good. Now here's a little secret that jazz musicians know about. And actually, we've been telling you about this for ages and ages. And Paul's just been doing something very similar in his thirds. That is chord notes. Chord notes. So within that scale of D minor 7, starting on D, there's some important notes. And the most important notes are the same notes that are in the chord. So what's in the chord? I've got D, F, A, and C. Yeah? And I've written them out there on line, whatever that line is. Okay? They're the chord notes of D minor 7. And G7. And C major 7. If I hit the right notes, it would sound a lot better. Can't even do that. Anyway. Now. Why have I mentioned this? Well, when we're actually improvising, because we haven't really done any improvising yet, we've just done a few scales. We've just done a few scales to sort of get us into the mood. When we're improvising, we can use any of the notes from the scale, from the major scale, but we need to finish on one of the chord notes. So any little, I'm going to explain what a riff is in a moment, but any little riff or musical motif or any little bit needs to finish, if we're playing the D minor 7 chord, on one of those D, F, A or C notes. So let me give you an example. If I play this, I finished on the D. The rest of the notes were just from the C scale. This time I finished on the A. I finished on the F this time. And I finished on the D that time. So if I do a little thing, a little made up thing, because that's what improvisation boils down to. You're making up a little motif. Yeah? So I'm going to start on the G, which is sort of okay. But I need to finish on one of the chord notes. If I don't finish on a chord note, listen to what happens. It doesn't resolve properly. There's an interesting word, resolve. There's something in music which actually is in every area of music. Chords, melody, even rhythm. Things need to resolve. So you've got tension, where things don't feel quite right, and then you've got to resolve. Now, the most obvious one of that, which we all do without knowing it, is you finish a tune, usually, not every time, but usually on the key chord and maybe even the key notes. So in other words, if I'm playing, well, let's use Spanish Eyes. I hope this is right. Now look where we're finished up in the key of C. We're finished up on the C note and the C chord. It's resolved. The tune has come home at the end of the piece of music. And leading up to that, so I've got a G7, that's my 5 chord. And I finish on C. It's resolved. It's a very, very important point. about improvisation. So you can have some tension. Before that, the G7 is creating a little harmonic tension, and it resolves on C. There's your resolve. Very, very important. Really important. Very important. Now, there's another little secret that musicians use when they're improvising, and that is you're not actually stuck in the major scale that you're playing in. Okay? You can use chromatic notes. In other words, notes from the chromatic scale. Now you're going to say, hang on a minute, chromatic, that's every note. That's a chromatic scale. Simply means play every note. So am I saying you can actually use any note you want to in improvisation? Actually, yes. But you have to be very, very careful, very cautious, okay? Because some of it's, unless you're careful, is going to sound a bit weird. Now, there may be some far-out jazz players amongst you, okay? There may be some really advanced players amongst you out there, and you use all sorts of different notes. Let me just play some random notes to you and see whether this works, because it won't. That doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work. No. If I use some notes to quickly resolve to a chord note, it works. Marvellous. Now, I've done something here, which I think I've called it... I can't point at the music, can I? Of course I can't. I've put here, we can use from notes from the major scale and the chromatic scale to link chord notes. But you have to resolve on the chord notes. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm resolving to the third of every chord. So there's a little bit here. It goes in E natural, goes up to the F. And then I've got a note from the chromatic scale, A sharp, which resolves to the third of G, which is the B. And then I've got a C sharp, which resolves to the E. So if I put the chords in there, suddenly it's starting to sound a little bit like jazz. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I'm using some notes here. But you probably noticed I'm not staying on those notes for very long. I'm not hanging around going, oh. As long as you do go through them quickly, you can start using these notes. Now here's another little tip. This is the extra notes being put in here. This is called an enclosure, believe it or not. So I'm still going from E to F, but I'm putting a little G flat in as well, like this. Yeah? So, and again, we start to sound a bit more jazzy. So I'm going from E to G flat or F sharp down to the F. Yeah? So I'm using, it's called an enclosure because I'm using the notes surrounding where we're going to resolve to. So I'm going there. Yeah? So we're starting to sound a bit more jazzy. And you'll see where we're going in just a moment, because I'm now starting to use proper jazzy riffs with some special notes included. Okay? The first one is called the flattened fifth. And this in jazz circles is known as the blue note. So if I think of the D minor, I did my D minor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the flattened fifth is that one, the A flat. If I do G, the flattened fifth is that one. And if I do C, the flattened fifth is that one. Now I've just done a little riff here. Something like that. Yeah? So we're starting now to create a little riff. I said I'd explain what a riff is. Well, a riff is very simply a small musical sort of motif, a little mini tune. That D minor 7. They're all little riffs. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of riffs that you can create from the scale notes, from the chromatic notes, and resolving on the chord notes. Okay? So if the one important thing to learn from this, chord notes are very, very, very important. And you can use them in many different ways, many different styles, not just jazzy sounding stuff. You can use it in any way that you want to do that. So if I was making something up jazzy here, based on D minor, the 2-5-1 in C, D minor 7, G7, C major, you could do this. G, and I'm resolving to the G. So all of that was following the rules that we've just talked about. We're always resolving on a chord note. We're using the little flattened fifths in there. And we're using some other chromatic scale notes as well. Now, there's a few basics. Let's put some of that into a style, and let's now analyze a little piece of music, if I can remember how to do this, Paul. I touch here, and then I touch there.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I touch there.
Yep.
Oh. Well, I hope that's worked. Oh, yes. Good point. I need to change my screen. There we go. Now, you can have this arrangement with pleasure, if that's the right word. I don't know whether that's the right word or not. This is an old tune by Duke Ellington and a guy called Billy Strayhorn, who I believe was his lead trombone player, but they wrote some great music together. And this is a jazz classic called Satin Doll. Now, what I've done here is I've written out the tune, I've written out the middle bit, and then I've done a little improvisation. Now, I don't want to put myself at all into this league, not even slightly. But you may remember years and years ago, the great organ player called Harry Stoneham produced a book where he actually wrote out all of his arrangements, including all the improvisations. Now, I've done something in my own modest and much lower level way, by writing out or transcribing is the correct term, all the improvisations in here. Now, to be honest, when I first played this and put it into my notation, it looked like a spider had crawled all over the page. It was a bit of a mess. So I have actually sort of, if you like, made it a lot clearer than the original improvisation was, because a key thing about this is you need to get into what's technically known as the groove. The groove, okay? We've got to feel the music. We don't play lots of straight notes. I've got some straight notes in here because the straight notes almost provide a little bit of contrast to the swingy notes. And remember, we did the dotted quaver with the semi-quaver afterwards. You'll see that's a recurring theme throughout this little piece of music. Okay, now if I can remember how to start the rhythm on here, which I think is just that. So I've just got a little chuggy swing rhythm, okay, and I'm just going to start from the top, and I'm going to try and read my own improvisation, which is a bit weird. So here we go. Oh, by the way, before we do that, let's just analyse this. Look at the chord sequence. We start on a C. We've then got a D minor 7, which is a 2. Then we've got a G7, which is the 5, but it doesn't go back to C. It goes up to another 2, 5. It goes up to the 2 of E minor 7, then to A7, which is the 5 of D. And look what the next chord is. It's a D7. It's not quite resolving to D yet. And look what the next chord is, D flat 7. Now, you may not remember Paul's session on what they call trichord substitutions. But just take it from me, without going into any great detail, D flat 7 is an alternative chord to a G7, believe it or not. So we've got D7 leading to a different version of G7, which leads to the C. So this entire song is sort of based on 2-5-1 chord progressions. Even the middle section, it's a 2-5-1 in F most of the way. Then it goes into a 2-5-1 in G. So the 2-5-1 chord progression is a really, really common jazz progression. So let's just have a little go at this. Anyway, that was the magic hand of Mr. Paul Carman there, adjusting microphones and doing all sorts of things. Marvellous. So what I was doing there was, it's the basic tune of Satin Doll, and this is, I suppose, what jazz musicians do, is they take a piece of music and then they mess around with it. And frankly, everything I did there was using the techniques we've just talked about. Chord notes, resolving on a chord note and staying in that sort of area of the harmony. It's very, very important. And then knowing which keys and where you're going and creating those little riffs and the different motifs. So I think that's all from me, Paul. So I hope you found that a little bit interesting. If you want this piece of music, this arrangement with all the improvisation in, just let Paul know and we'll get it off to you. So thanks for listening. I'll see you again in the future. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you. Thanks very much, Andy. It's always an absolute pleasure to have him here with us. And I tell you what's nice for me, and you can choose to believe this or believe it not. We don't listen to each other's bits before we actually do this live. And it's great. You know, I've picked something up off Andy today. I don't mind admitting it. I've picked a couple of little pointers up, because I'm not a great jazz and swing player. That's Andy's bag, really. Give me a ballad, I can do it. Give me an orchestral piece, but I'm not great on improvising. So I've learnt a few things as well. And just before we sort of sign off, I'm just going to repeat what I said earlier. There's been a lot of information there today, an awful lot of information. If you pick a couple of things up, each time we do this sort of webinar, it's worth it, I assure you. And I'll stress again, judging by the comments that came in, learn things in different keys. You will only benefit from doing that. Yes, it's a little bit harder work. You have to think about it a little bit more, but you will benefit from it. How often have you gone for a piece of music that you really want to play and it's in a key that you don't like playing in, and what happens is you end up not playing it? If you can practice things in different keys. And actually, the beauty of this going straight up on YouTube, you can watch that video as many times as you want. So, as Andy said, hope you've enjoyed that. Hope that's been a little bit different today. We'll be back to buttons and how to do things next month. Thank you for joining us. And from myself and from Andy, goodbye. We'll see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.